It was one of those rare mornings when everything felt still, no rush, no demands. The kind of day that, on the surface, looked peaceful but felt like it was holding its breath. The kind of morning where I'd sit in my favorite chair, coffee in hand, scrolling through the news, and everything would seem okay. Normal, even. I'd always been a creature of habit, and today was no different. The sun had just started to break through the blinds, spilling its soft light over the kitchen. Outside, the world was still. I took a long sip from my mug, letting the warmth of the coffee sink into my bones as I checked the headlines. Same old, same old. Then, I heard the soft ping of my phone on the counter. Nora's name flashed on the screen. Leaving the cabin, headed to the airport. I'll call when I land. She was on one of her solo trips as usual, always needing time away, time to herself. I'd learned not to question it. It was her thing. And though I had my doubts about some of her trips, I never said anything. She needed her space. She deserved it. But over the last year, there had been moments when I wondered, why do I feel like I'm losing her instead of getting to know her better? I set my phone down and stared out the window for a moment. The morning was quiet, too quiet. That's when I noticed it. Her smartwatch had pinged on my screen. I hadn't meant to check it, but the notification sat there, almost mocking me. It was a step counter, 3,281 steps. At 2 a.m., Nora was supposed to be off the grid. That was the plan, or so she told me before she left. No phone calls, no emails, just quiet time in nature. She'd mentioned a remote cabin, no Wi-Fi, no distractions. But 3,281 steps at 2 a.m., that wasn't quiet time. I quickly turned the phone over, but the seed had already been planted. I leaned back in my chair, trying to swallow down the knot in my stomach. It was nothing, right? Just a little step count. But the timing felt off, and as much as I told myself it didn't matter, a cold chill crawled up my spine. The coffee had gone cold in my hands, but I hadn't noticed when I stopped drinking. I had to remind myself, Nora was good at this, at disappearing, at making everything seem fine, even when I had a creeping feeling that something wasn't right. I didn't text her back, didn't say anything, just let it sit. I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront this. Not yet. It was just something small, a little piece of data that didn't add up. But what did it mean? I grabbed my phone again, but this time I didn't scroll to check the news. Instead, I opened her last text and read it over once more. I'll call when I land. I closed my eyes for a second and tried to steady my thoughts. No big deal, right? But then the next thought hit me, uninvited. What if she wasn't where she said she was? The front door clicked open around noon, and I heard Nora's voice before I even saw her. "Hey, babe! I'm back!" She sounded lighter than usual, like the weight of the world had been lifted off her shoulders. She always had that post-trip glow about her, the kind that made you believe every single minute away was exactly what she needed to reset. I glanced up from the couch, trying to act normal, trying to pretend I hadn't been overthinking every little thing since she'd left. Nora stood in the doorway, her suitcase in hand, a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She was beautiful, as always, with that natural glow that made her look like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. But today, something felt off. "You look great," I said, trying to sound casual. "Did you have a good time?" "Yeah, I did," she replied, kicking off her shoes as she stepped inside. "A lot of thinking, you know. A lot of quiet." I nodded, leaning back against the couch, watching her unpack. She was so smooth, so good at making everything seem effortless. Maybe it was just me. Maybe I was being paranoid. But that ping from her smartwatch kept circling in my mind. I watched her as she moved around the room, dropping her things by the door. There was a slight hesitation in her step, a quick glance over her shoulder at me when she thought I wasn't looking. "How was the cabin?" I asked casually, forcing the question out, even though the unease in my chest had grown heavier. "It was, nice," she said, pausing for just a fraction too long. "Quiet, peaceful. You should come next time. Maybe I'll invite you along when I need another reset." She laughed, but it felt hollow, like she was trying too hard to fill the silence between us. I swallowed hard. This wasn't like her. The way she brushed off the question, the way she wasn't asking me how my days had been. Usually she would want to talk, to share every little detail, but not today. "Hey, I noticed something odd," I said, my voice unsteady. "The steps on your smartwatch, 3,281 steps at 2 a.m.? That seems like a lot for a night off the grid. She froze for a second, just a slight, almost imperceptible twitch of her head. But it was enough for me to notice. "Oh, yeah," she said quickly, her smile returning. "I must have taken a walk in the middle of the night. I woke up, couldn't sleep. You know how it is. Just needed some air." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But her explanation felt rehearsed. Too rehearsed. "Yeah, I guess," I replied, my voice barely a whisper now. "Just seemed odd, that's all. I thought you were supposed to be off the grid. No phones, no tech." Her eyes darted to the side for a moment before she met my gaze. "Well, I didn't have my phone on me, remember? Just my watch. I wanted to keep track of my steps, get some exercise. You know I like to be active." She sounded almost convincing. Almost. I felt the weight of her response press down on me, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. The anxiety I had been keeping at bay these past few days was starting to crawl into my chest, making it harder to ignore. I didn't push it further. I could feel myself retreating, a part of me pulling back because I didn't want to confront the truth. Not yet. But I knew something was wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. "Anyway," I said, standing up and walking toward her. "Glad you're home. I missed you." She smiled at that, genuine this time. "I missed you too." But as we hugged, I couldn't help but notice the coolness in her touch, the way she held herself back just a little. She was here, but not fully here. It was the first time I questioned whether I was still part of her life the way I thought I was. And the thought lingered long after we separated, like a dark cloud hanging over the rest of the day. As she made her way to the kitchen to get something to eat, I remained in the living room, staring at the empty space where she had just been. I didn't say it out loud, but I felt it. I was waiting for the moment when everything would unravel, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it, but I knew I had to be. The weeks passed, and Nora seemed like her usual self, at first, but the cracks in the facade were starting to show. Small things, nothing too obvious, but enough to make me feel like I was living in a house made of glass, waiting for it to shatter. It started with the texts, shorter than usual, clipped, like she was rushing to get them over with. "How's your day?" was met with a simple, "Fine." "What are you up to?" A quick, "Busy." And then, of course, the phone calls. At first she'd answer immediately, her voice warm and engaging. But now, the calls were brief, often with an excuse about needing to get back to work or someone at the door. It was subtle, but it hurt. I began noticing other things too. The perfume, something new, something unfamiliar. At first I brushed it off. Maybe she'd bought a new scent, maybe she was trying something different. But after a while, it started to nag at me. The sweet floral notes weren't like anything she'd worn before. I could still remember the lavender she used to wear, the one that reminded me of summer nights. This one, though, it wasn't her. I asked about it one evening, half joking. "New perfume?" Her eyes darted to the side for a moment before she laughed, a little too quickly. "Oh yeah, I thought I'd try something new. I was at the store, and it smelled nice. No big deal." But it felt like a big deal. The way she said it, the way she avoided my eyes for a split second, those were the things that didn't sit right with me. Then came the phone calls, the ones she took in private. I noticed it one night when I was sitting on the couch, flipping through a book while Nora was in the kitchen. She'd gotten a call and, as usual, stepped out of the room. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but this time, I couldn't help but overhear her tone. It was sharp, a little too defensive. "I told you, I can't talk right now," she snapped before lowering her voice. I couldn't make out the rest of the conversation, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. When she returned, she acted like nothing had happened, but I could tell she wasn't the same. She was distant, lost in her own thoughts, and when I looked at her, she didn't meet my gaze for long. I'd always prided myself on being the understanding partner, the one who gave space when it was needed. But this wasn't just space. It was a chasm opening between us, and every little thing, every offhanded comment or subtle shift, only made it worse. One evening, we were sitting in the living room, watching some random show. It was supposed to be an easy night, just the two of us. But instead, I felt the silence stretching out, uncomfortable and heavy. I could hear the hum of the television, but it was like it was happening in another world. "I think we need to talk," I said, breaking the silence. Nora didn't immediately respond. Instead, she just took a deep breath, her eyes still glued to the screen. "About what?" she asked, a little too casually. I could feel my heartbeat pick up. There was no turning back now. "About you. About us." Her eyes flicked to me for a moment, but she quickly turned her attention back to the TV. "There's nothing to talk about." Her voice was steady, but there was something about it that made my stomach twist. I could feel the frustration building inside me, but I kept my tone even. "Really? Because I've been noticing some things. You've been different lately." She shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "What things?" I hesitated. "How do you explain what you're feeling without sounding like you're making accusations? The way you've been acting, distant, cold even, the phone calls, the perfume, the way you barely talk to me anymore." Nora let out a soft sigh, her face softening, but not in the way I wanted. "You're imagining things, babe. Everything's fine. I've just been tired, that's all." But I didn't buy it. The more she dismissed me, the more my gut told me that something was wrong, something deeper than just exhaustion. "Are you seeing someone else?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Nora froze. Her body went rigid for a second before she forced a laugh. "What? No, of course not. You know I'm not like that." But the laugh didn't reach her eyes. The silence between us grew, and I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. There was a part of me that wanted to believe her, that wanted to accept her excuse and move on. But the other part, the part that had been watching every little change, wasn't convinced. "You've been lying to me," I said quietly, more to myself than to her. She didn't answer right away, and I could feel the walls going up between us again. This wasn't just a bad day. This wasn't about perfume or phone calls. This was about trust, and it was slipping through my fingers, no matter how hard I tried to hold on. "I need some air," I muttered, standing up abruptly. Nora looked at me with a confused frown. "What? You're not going to finish the show?" I didn't answer. I just grabbed my jacket and walked out, the door closing behind me with a finality that left a bitter taste in my mouth. It was the first time in a long while that I'd felt like I was alone, even though she was right there, just a few feet away. The more I thought about it, the more the weight of the situation pressed down on me. This wasn't just about Nora anymore. It was about me, too. How long could I keep pretending that everything was fine when it was so clearly falling apart? And why did I feel like she was keeping me at arm's length, as if she was already making her escape? It wasn't until the following weekend that I found the first real crack in the armor. Nora had gone out for the day, something about meeting a friend for lunch. I'd been feeling more off than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. She was still distant, the same half smiles and brief replies when I tried to talk. But this time, I wasn't letting it slide. I'd spent the last few days wrestling with myself, wondering if I was just imagining things. I couldn't ignore it anymore, not when everything inside me screamed that something was wrong. So, when she left, I decided to do something I hadn't done before. I snooped. I didn't like the idea of it, didn't like that part of me, but the curiosity gnawed at me. I had to know. Her laptop was left open on the kitchen table, and I found myself standing in front of it, hands hovering, hesitant. I had no right to go through her things, no right to invade her privacy. But the thought of her leaving me in the dark any longer, of whatever she was hiding, was worse than crossing that line. I took a deep breath and sat down in front of the screen, trying to steady my shaky hands. The laptop was locked, of course. Nora was usually meticulous about security. I knew the password, though. It had always been the same. I typed it in and pressed enter. The screen lit up, and I exhaled a quiet breath of relief. I could hear the sound of my pulse in my ears as I began to click through files. Nothing out of the ordinary at first, just emails, documents, things I'd seen before. But then I stumbled across something that sent a shiver down my spine, a folder named Trip Details. I clicked it open. There were several subfolders inside, photos, itineraries, receipts. As I dug deeper, I saw that most of the files were from the weekend she had just returned from. The trip she'd claimed was just a solo getaway, but one file in particular caught my attention. Hotel receipt, February 15th to February 17th. I opened it, and my stomach dropped when I saw the details. It was a receipt for a hotel booking in a city I didn't recognize. The dates matched up with her recent trip, but there was no mention of a cabin. A sinking feeling washed over me as I scrolled down. The name on the receipt wasn't hers. It was someone else's. Shane. I stared at the name for a long time. Shane. Who the hell was Shane? The room felt like it was closing in around me. My mind raced, running through all the possible explanations, but none of them made sense. She had told me she was alone on her trip. She had assured me she needed time to clear her head, to be by herself. So, why was she staying at a hotel with someone named Shane? I tried to calm myself down, telling myself that maybe I was reading too much into this. Maybe there was a mistake. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a coincidence. I could feel it in my bones. I clicked on the next file in the folder. This one was labeled Photos 2/15th. I hesitated for a moment before opening it. The first image that popped up was blurry, a shot of the city skyline. But as I swiped through the photos, my heart pounded harder. There was one of Nora, sitting at a table with a man, Shane, I assumed. They were laughing, her hand resting on his. Another photo showed them sitting on a bed together, her head resting on his shoulder. They looked comfortable, relaxed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something break inside me. I didn't need to see anymore. I closed the laptop with a snap, the sudden silence in the room deafening. I could feel my pulse in my throat, a mixture of anger, hurt, and disbelief swirling inside me. How long had this been going on? Was I the fool for not seeing it? Was everything she had said just a lie? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The room felt suffocating. I pushed myself away from the table, standing up and pacing around the kitchen. My mind raced with a million questions, all of them leading to the same conclusion. She was having an affair. I thought back to the last few weeks, to the little things I'd brushed off. The distance, the phone calls she'd taken in private, the perfume, the late nights, the secrecy. It was all falling into place now, and it was more painful than I could have imagined. I was angry, but there was something deeper, something that hurt more than the betrayal itself. It was the realization that I had been a fool, trusting her when she'd been hiding the truth right in front of me. As I stood there, trying to wrap my head around everything, I heard the sound of the front door opening. Nora was back. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know if I could even look at her without losing control. I stayed quiet, standing in the kitchen, my back turned to her when she entered. "Hey, babe," Nora said, her voice light. "I'm back. How was your day?" I took a slow breath, trying to steady myself, to calm the storm in my chest. I turned to face her, my eyes locked on hers. "Who's Shane?" I asked, my voice cold, calm, almost too calm. Her eyes flickered, just for a moment, and then her smile faded. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. For the first time, I could see it. The guilt, the hesitation. And I knew, in that moment, that everything was about to change. The silence between us stretched, thick and suffocating. Nora's eyes darted around the room, avoiding mine, and I could hear the faint sound of her breathing, quick and shallow. She was trying to gather her thoughts, but I could see the panic creeping in, barely contained. I didn't wait for her to speak. I couldn't. I wasn't going to let her lie to me anymore. "Who is he, Nora?" My voice was quieter now, but still firm. I wasn't angry, not yet, but the hurt was starting to burn through. "Shane, who is he?" She took a step back, her hands trembling slightly as she brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. I could see her struggling to piece together some kind of explanation, a story that might fix everything. But nothing was coming. I didn't need her to say anything else. I already knew. "Is he the one you were with during your trip? The trip you said was just for you?" I could barely keep the bitterness out of my voice now. "The trip where you were off the grid, but you were with him instead?" Her face paled. For a brief second, I thought she might collapse. She reached for the counter, her fingers curling around the edge as if it was the only thing holding her up. I could see her trying to collect herself, trying to craft a story that would somehow make sense of this mess. "It's not like that," she finally said, her voice breaking. Her eyes met mine for a moment, but quickly dropped to the floor. "I didn't mean for you to find out this way. I didn't want to hurt you." I took a slow breath, trying to steady the storm inside me. I could feel my heart hammering in my chest, but I wasn't going to let my emotions get the best of me, not yet. "How long, Nora?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "How long has this been going on?" She squeezed her eyes shut, her shoulders hunched as if she was trying to shrink away from my question. When she spoke again, her words were barely a whisper. A few months, she said, her voice cracking. It started after I don't know. Things have been so strained between us, and I didn't know how to fix it. Shane, he's been there for me in ways I didn't realize I needed. Her words hit me like a slap. So you turned to him while you were still with me? She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with tears. I never wanted to hurt you, I swear, but I didn't know how to fix things between us. I felt so disconnected from you, and I thought, maybe if I found someone else, it would help me figure things out. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. The pain of her betrayal stung more than I had prepared for. But there was something else too. Anger. And not just at her. At myself. At how blind I had been. I've been trying to talk to you, Nora, I said, my voice quieter now, the hurt bleeding through. I've been trying to understand what was going on. And all this time, you've been with him? She nodded, the tears starting to spill down her cheeks. I never wanted to hurt you. I didn't want to destroy everything we had. But I did, and I'm sorry. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. I messed up. I don't know how to fix it. I didn't know what to say. The words I wanted to scream were trapped in my throat, but I couldn't bring myself to release them. Instead, I stood there in the kitchen, my hands trembling at my sides. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I loved, had been hiding this from me for months. She had been lying, pretending everything was fine when it was anything but. I don't know if I can forgive you for this, Nora, I said finally, the words tasting like acid in my mouth. I don't know if I can trust you anymore. Her face crumpled, and she stepped toward me, reaching for my hand. Please, don't say that. I know I've ruined everything, but I love you. I really do. And I want to fix this. I pulled my hand away, a sharp, instinctual reaction. You love me? Really? I shook my head, the disbelief rising in my chest. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have lied to my face and gone behind my back. The silence between us felt unbearable now. She was still standing there, her face pale, pleading with me. But I couldn't bring myself to say anything else. I didn't know how to fix this. I didn't know how to look at her the same way after what she had done. I need space, I said quietly, my voice shaky. I need time to think. I can't. Please don't leave, she interrupted, stepping closer again, her hand reaching out. But I took a step back, my body reacting before my mind could catch up. I can't be here right now, I said, the words coming out sharp and final. I can't look at you and pretend this isn't happening. Not yet. I need to be away from you, from this. And with that, I turned and walked out the door, the sound of her voice calling after me, fading into nothing. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was doing. All I knew was that everything I thought I had, everything I thought I understood, had just been ripped apart. And for the first time in years, I felt completely, utterly lost. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't get the image of Nora and Shane out of my head. The way they'd looked together, laughing, so at ease with each other. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw it. I could feel the weight of the betrayal pressing on my chest, suffocating me. I stayed at a hotel for the first few nights. I couldn't stand the thought of being in the house we shared. Everything about it felt wrong now. The bed was too empty, too quiet, the kitchen too still. It was as if the house itself had been tainted by her lies. But I knew I couldn't stay away forever. I had to face her, to confront the mess she'd made, and I needed to make sure I had everything in place before I did. I wasn't about to give her the chance to explain her way out of this. No, this time, I was the one who needed control. I reached out to Jason, an old friend of mine who worked in IT. He was always the one I could rely on when I needed help with anything technical. I told him I needed to secure some files, and he agreed to meet me later that week. When he arrived, I handed him a thumb drive and explained what I needed. Jason didn't ask questions. He just nodded, the familiar understanding passing between us. We spent hours going through the files on Nora's laptop and her phone. It was everything I had feared, and more. Photos, texts, emails. The evidence was all there, laid out in black and white. I felt sick, but I couldn't stop myself. I had to know the truth. I had to see it all for myself. After we were done, I left the thumb drive in a safe place. I wasn't going to use the evidence immediately. I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when Nora would have nowhere to hide. I wasn't about to give her the satisfaction of a quick, easy explanation. I needed to make sure everything was documented just in case. The next step was finding a lawyer. I didn't know much about the legal side of things. Nora and I didn't have a complicated financial arrangement, but I needed someone who could advise me. I didn't want to be caught off guard. I reached out to Marissa, a lawyer I knew from years ago. She'd always been sharp, no nonsense. She agreed to meet me in person, and we sat down over coffee a few days later. "I'm assuming this isn't about a simple divorce," she said, after I briefly explained the situation. I shook my head. I don't just want to separate, I want to make sure I'm covering all my bases. I need to make sure she can't play me." Marissa nodded, her face serious. "I'll help you gather what you need. I'll also set up some contingency plans in case things escalate. You don't want to be blindsided by anything, and based on what you've told me, you're going to want to protect your assets." I agreed, and over the next few days, we worked through everything. I didn't want to make any hasty decisions, but I knew the direction I was heading. I was preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. As the days dragged on, I continued to gather evidence, making sure I had all the details covered. I compiled receipts, tracked her movements, and documented phone records. There was no way I was going to leave any stone unturned. But despite the meticulous preparation, one thing remained clear. I was done. I couldn't go back to the person I had been before, the one who blindly trusted her. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became of the final act that would end this chapter of my life. The dinner. I had a feeling she wouldn't see it coming. She'd still be pretending like everything was normal, but it wasn't. It hadn't been normal for a long time. When everything was ready, I called the caterer. I had already arranged for a private dinner event at the wine bar. I told them it would be for a few potential investors. I wanted Nora to think it was just another work-related gathering. I made sure everything was in place. Food, wine, everything. I even arranged for a projector, knowing I'd need it for the big reveal. This dinner would be the moment where I'd finally get all the answers. It would be the moment when Nora couldn't hide anymore. It was the perfect setup, an intimate, controlled environment where I would lay everything out. I would make sure she couldn't lie her way out of this. She would face the consequences of what she'd done. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of control. I was taking back the power that I'd given away so freely. This time, I wouldn't just be another victim of her lies. I was going to make sure that, when the dust settled, I would be the one standing strong. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I wasn't doing it to punish her. I was doing it because I had to, for myself. And when the day of the dinner finally came, everything was set. Nora would walk in, smiling, thinking it was just another night. But by the time she left, nothing would ever be the same. The evening arrived, and everything was set. The wine bar was quiet, elegant, the way I always imagined it for these types of events: dim lighting, soft music playing in the background, and the subtle hum of conversation as the staff prepared everything to perfection. I had arranged for everything to feel casual yet intimate, exactly what Nora would expect. She had no idea what was coming. She had no idea how much of her world was about to be turned upside down. When Nora walked in, she looked as radiant as ever, dressed in a simple black dress that hugged her curves just the right way. Her hair was pulled back into a sleek ponytail, and she looked around the room, taking in the atmosphere, smiling as she spotted me across the room. "Hey, babe!" she called out, her voice light and easy. I stood up to greet her, giving her a quick kiss on the cheek. "Hey," I replied. "Thanks for coming. This should be fun." I gestured to the two empty chairs at the table. She smiled, pulling the chair out and sitting down gracefully. "Is this for work? You never said much about what this dinner was for." I could tell she was curious, but she was playing it cool. Nora always played it cool. "Yeah, a little bit," I said, trying to keep things light. "Just some investors, potential partners. I thought we could go over the details while enjoying a good meal." She nodded, scanning the room with a faint smile. "It looks nice," she said, her voice warm. "I like it here. So, what's the plan? Who's joining us?" I didn't answer immediately. I had to wait for the right moment. I could feel my pulse quicken, but I wasn't going to rush it. I wanted this to be perfect. As the waiter brought out the appetizers, Nora continued chatting casually about her trip and how she'd recharged, how the cabin had been exactly what she needed, but I couldn't focus on what she was saying. My mind was elsewhere, replaying everything that had led to this night. When the main course arrived, I knew it was time. I stood up, and Nora paused, looking up at me with a puzzled expression. I smiled softly at her, trying to hide the weight of what I was about to do. Before we dig in, I want to show you something, I said, motioning to the projector that had been set up earlier. Nora's brows furrowed in curiosity. Show me what? She asked, her tone a little more guarded now. I walked over to the screen, and with a click of a button, the first image appeared. It was a photo of her, taken during her recent trip, the one she claimed was just for her. She was sitting with Shane at what looked like a cozy cafe, laughing. Nora froze mid-bite, her fork hovering in the air. She looked at the screen, her face draining of color. I could feel the tension building, thick and suffocating. What is this? She stammered, her voice shaky. What are you doing? I didn't respond immediately. I let the silence stretch for a moment as I watched her process what was happening. Then I clicked through a few more images, each one more incriminating than the last. Nora and Shane at dinner. Nora and Shane at the hotel. Her hand resting on his. I could see her eyes darting back and forth, trying to make sense of the evidence. She looked at me, her expression pleading, but I wasn't looking for an explanation. I had all the proof I needed. Who is he, Nora? I asked quietly, but my voice was steel, controlled. Who is Shane? Her face crumpled. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. I could see her shaking, her fingers clutching the edge of the table, as if she might fall apart any second. Finally, she whispered, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I didn't want her explanation. I didn't need her words. I just needed the truth. You lied to me, I said, my voice steady. You lied to me about everything, and I let you. I let you walk all over me, all because I thought you loved me. I thought we had something real. Nora's eyes filled with tears, and she wiped at them furiously, but her composure was slipping. She looked around the room at the guests who had arrived, their faces uncomfortable, their attention fixed on her, then back at me. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She was losing her control, and I wasn't going to let her reclaim it, not now. I turned to the projector and clicked once more. The last image appeared, a receipt from the hotel where she'd stayed with Shane, the same hotel I'd found in her files. I didn't need to say anything more. The image spoke for itself. I gave you everything, Nora, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, but sharp as a knife. And this is what you did with it. You tore us apart for nothing. She stood up suddenly, her chair scraping across the floor. She rushed over to me, her hands shaking as she reached for my arm. Please, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far, but I didn't know how to tell you. I pulled away from her touch, the finality in my decision settling deep in my chest. No more apologies, Nora. I'm done. I'm done being the fool. You've hurt me more than I ever thought possible. I turned back to the guests, who were awkwardly shifting in their seats, clearly uncomfortable. I nodded toward the door. I think this dinner is over. Nora was speechless, standing there, frozen, her hands trembling as if she could barely keep herself upright. The tears had stopped, but the guilt was written all over her face. I walked toward the door, and before I left, I turned to her one last time. You're on your own now. I left the restaurant without looking back, the weight of the evening crashing down on me as I stepped out into the cold night air. It was over. It had to be. The days after the dinner felt like I was walking through fog. I had expected the fallout from Nora's betrayal, but I wasn't prepared for how quickly everything unraveled. It felt like the world I had built, the world I thought I understood, was coming apart at the seams, piece by piece. Nora called me the next morning, and I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear the apologies, the excuses. I wasn't interested in her explanations anymore. I had given her enough chances, and every time, she had betrayed me in one way or another. By the time I did pick up the phone a few days later, my voicemail was flooded with messages from her, desperate, frantic, pleading with me to talk, to hear her side of the story. But it wasn't her side I was interested in anymore. The truth had already been laid out for me. There was nothing left to say. My phone buzzed again, and this time it was my lawyer, Marissa. She'd been reviewing the evidence I'd gathered, and I knew she had news to share. I think it's time we prepare for the next steps, Marissa said when I answered. I've already contacted a few people to help secure your assets. You've got everything documented, but I'd suggest we move quickly. You don't want this dragging on any longer than necessary. I nodded, my thoughts still swirling around the last few days. I'm ready. I've made up my mind. Let's get this done. As I hung up, I felt a strange sense of clarity. I had spent so much time trying to hold everything together, trying to salvage something that wasn't worth saving. But now, I was finally free. Free from the lies, the manipulation, and the constant questioning of my worth. I spent the next few days packing up my things, my clothes, my personal belongings, everything I could take without feeling like I was erasing the past entirely. Nora wasn't around much anymore. I assumed she was dealing with the fallout from the dinner, trying to explain her way out of the mess she had created. But that wasn't my problem anymore. The worst part of all this wasn't just her betrayal. It was realizing that I had spent so long ignoring the red flags, the late nights, the secrecy, the subtle lies. I had seen the signs, but I had allowed myself to be blinded by love, by the idea of us. The idea of a perfect life that didn't exist. The morning I finally left, I didn't feel the rush of freedom I thought I would. Instead, there was just a numbness, like I was going through the motions without really feeling anything at all. But as I packed my last bag and turned to look at the place I had once called home, I felt a sense of finality settle over me. Nora's life was falling apart. Her job had placed her on administrative leave pending an investigation into her actions. And Shane had been terminated. The professional consequences were just the beginning of her unraveling. It wasn't just her affair that had ruined her relationship with me. It was the lies, the betrayal, the fact that she had never truly respected me. I drove by the house once, just to see if she was still there. I couldn't help myself. But when I saw her standing in the doorway, her face pale and eyes hollow, I didn't stop. I kept driving, away from the place I used to call home. I didn't want to see her. I didn't want to be reminded of what had been. Back in town, I started to notice something else, something I hadn't expected. Shane, the man Nora had been seeing, seemed to be making appearances around town. Not just in places I knew he'd been with Nora, but also near Lily's house, her best friend's place. I hadn't thought much of it at first, but the more I saw him, the more I wondered if he'd been involved with more than just Nora. One evening, I saw him outside of Lily's apartment, talking to someone. The conversation didn't seem friendly. It was tense, angry even. I couldn't make out the details, but I could tell something was off. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Lily had to know. She had been part of Nora's inner circle for years. I'd watched them grow close over time. And now it seemed that not only had Nora been hiding her affair, but she may have had help. The realization chilled me. There were more people involved in this betrayal than I had imagined, and it wasn't just about Nora and Shane anymore. I didn't know if Lily was part of the cover-up, but I wasn't about to sit back and let this continue without understanding the full extent of the lies. But instead of confronting anyone, I just quietly documented everything. I wasn't interested in revenge. I had already made peace with the fact that what was done could never be undone. I wasn't going to let Nora's actions define me any longer. But this I had to know. Who else was involved in her deception? I didn't take the information to anyone, not yet. But every time I found something new, I added it to the mental file I was building. It wasn't about getting revenge. It was about understanding how deep the web of lies really went. The next few days were filled with more reflection. I kept myself busy, but the truth of everything was slowly sinking in. As much as I wanted to look away, I couldn't. The betrayal, the lies, the feeling of being completely out of control in my own life, it was too much. But one thing became clear. No matter how deep the betrayal went, I was done. I was no longer the person who would let himself be walked on. Nora and Shane's worlds were crashing down around them, and I had no intention of standing in the rubble. I was done with the past. I was done with her. And I was ready to move on, finally reclaiming the life I had lost somewhere along the way. It was surreal, driving away from the city that had once felt like home. For years, I had built my life here, my relationships, my business, my routine. But now, as I merged onto the highway, heading toward a small coastal town, I felt the weight of the world lift from my shoulders. I hadn't told anyone I was leaving. I didn't need to. Nora, she had enough on her plate. My parents, I couldn't bear the thought of more guilt trips, more pleas to come back, to make things right. The truth was, I wasn't going to let anyone pull me back into that suffocating life. I'd packed only what I needed: clothes, my laptop, a few personal items, but most of my belongings stayed behind. The apartment in the city was just a reminder of everything that had gone wrong, everything I needed to leave behind. The last thing I wanted was a permanent reminder of the mess Nora had made of everything. The drive felt long but cleansing. I spent hours listening to the hum of the road beneath me, the wind picking up as I passed through small towns, heading toward the coast. When I finally reached the small town by the ocean, it was exactly what I needed: quiet, peaceful, a far cry from the chaos I'd left behind, the kind of place where no one knew my name, where no one cared about the past. I found a small house on the outskirts, nestled against a quiet hill with a view of the sea. It was nothing fancy, but it was perfect for starting over. No big city distractions, no memories of what I'd lost, just me, the ocean, and the sound of waves crashing against the shore. It was the kind of peace I had been craving for far too long. I spent the first few days unpacking, getting the house set up, figuring out what it meant to live without the constant weight of betrayal hanging over me. The simplicity of it was refreshing. I woke up early, took long walks on the beach, and spent my afternoons working on a few side projects I had pushed aside while I was with Nora. I wasn't sure what I was building yet, but it felt like I was building something that was truly mine for the first time in a long time. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a brilliant orange, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee in my hands. It was the first time in months I had felt this level of clarity, this sense of peace. The air smelled salty, fresh, nothing like the sterile city air I was used to. The silence was comforting, but there was something else too. A strange sense of empowerment that I hadn't expected. In leaving everything behind, I had reclaimed something: control, peace, my own sense of self. I thought about Nora for a moment, about everything she had taken from me, and everything I had allowed her to take. But it was distant now, that pain, like the fading echo of a memory. I had built a life with her, sure, but I wasn't going to allow it to define me anymore. I picked up my phone, the first time I'd checked it in a few days, and I saw the new notifications. Texts, missed calls, voicemails, the usual suspects. Nora, my parents, my sister, all the same desperate, guilt-ridden messages, begging for me to come back, to fix things. But I didn't open any of them. Instead, I swiped the screen, turning off my notifications completely. I was done with the noise. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself to anyone. I didn't have to apologize for protecting myself, for walking away from the chaos. I set my phone down and stared out at the ocean, the waves rolling in. It was simple, it was quiet, and it was enough. A few days later, I received a letter from Nora. I'd been expecting it, but that didn't make it any easier to read. In her letter, she poured out apologies, regret, and all the things she had left unsaid when I walked out. She wrote about how she had made mistakes, about how she was willing to change, to work through everything. She begged for another chance. I read it through once, twice, and then I set it aside. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel the need to respond. I didn't even feel pity. I just felt free. The freedom wasn't in the escape itself. It was in the decision to let go. I had been drowning in guilt and betrayal for so long, but now I was finally breathing again. There was nothing left to fix. There was no need to go back. What I needed now was to move forward, on my terms. A week passed, and then another. Life became routine, but in the best way. I worked on the things I'd always wanted to do, small business ventures, projects that felt right for me. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I wasn't doing it to prove anything. I was doing it because it felt like the right thing to do. I stopped checking my phone constantly. I went to the local cafe for coffee every morning, started getting to know the people in town, making small talk with strangers who were nothing like the circles I had moved in before. There was a quiet joy in it, in the simplicity of living for myself, of having no expectations to meet, no roles to play. One afternoon, I got a call from my old friend Jason. We talked for a while about work, about life, about everything in between. "Do you regret it?" he asked toward the end of our conversation. "Not for a second," I said, and for the first time in months, I meant it. As I hung up, the weight I had been carrying for so long seemed to finally lift. I was no longer tied to the past, to Nora, to all the lies. I was free to build whatever I wanted, on my terms, and with no one holding me back. I didn't know where life would take me next, but for the first time in a long while, I didn't need to. I was content in the silence, in the peace that I had found on my own, and that was enough. As the sun dipped below the horizon once more, I took a deep breath and let the waves wash over me, knowing that I was moving forward, no longer defined by the mistakes of the past. I was finally living for myself,